Welcome back to the Blog Boy Roundtable, presented by the Bay Area Examiner. This week we've got a bit of a three-man weave going. From the Bay Area Examiner, you have myself, Seth Varnador, and Robert Stieg. From DraftKings Network, you have Nick Saban. No Anthony Vito or Nathan Bond this week. They are out of commission or working real jobs and things like that. So we all did pretty good last week. Looking back, nobody had a losing week. Everybody is at 500 or better through 2 weeks. Not terrible, especially with early starts here. We've got two of the leaders here, and I am not one of them. Steve, you are currently 7-1. Nick is 5-3. And we've got another slate of 4 picks this week. But first, we'll talk about last week. Everybody picked Colorado -3. Literally everybody just about in the country, except for the pro bettors who didn't want to look like squares and pick Nebraska. They were the public team, and it wasn't even close. I think we talked about it a little bit. The Colorado defense isn't great, but the Nebraska offense was so bad that it didn't really matter, right? We've yet to kind of see a team that can do it on both sides of the ball play Colorado, and I don't think we're going to see it this week either.
Yeah, another kind of got off to a kind of slow start, but still another impressive performance, particularly by Deion Sanders for Colorado. Like, he's starting to get like a lot of Heisman buzz, and the interesting thing is, it's like people are like starting to like realize how good he was, and it's like, no, if you like watched him at Jackson State the last couple of years, like, he was that dude. Like, he was like, even with, again, lower level of competition in FCS, the SWAC, he was great for that team, like, the entire season. And you're seeing that, Deion coming in and declaring him the starter in the opening press conference, it's starting to work. It's
good call. Yeah, I don't think he's scared off anybody at quarterback that he's really upset about.
It was clear as day what was going to happen in that game. I think the 3 points there was kind of like a conservative look, like, maybe Nebraska's offense will turn it around. But, I said it, Matt Rule has to absolutely bury the team, and then he can start being good. And so I think it was I really want to know who bet Nebraska, meet them and discuss with them and figure out what's happening, and then recommend them to betterhelp.com for their crippling gambling addiction.
What's funny is you had some guys that are really sharp that do this for a living, bet Nebraska, just because of how I think it's hard for people to make an adjustment on Colorado after 1 week. So all the preseason numbers you had were Colorado is not going to be a very good team. And then they're so public, people in the public want to bet them so much. I think it had the most. They said the Colorado game had more bets than anybody in the NFL, and the week 1 lines for the NFL had been out for almost a month. Only the Chiefs had more money on them than Colorado. So some of those guys just go against the public, right?
Yeah, there was a point during last week at DraftKings where 25% of all of the total college football bets, period, was on that Colorado-Nebraska game. The Deion thing, it's real, man. And you're gonna see that this weekend with game day, big noon Saturday. I think 60 Minutes is gonna be there. First Take is gonna be there, and it's just a Colorado State rivalry game. But
what's crazy? Yeah, it's not. But what's crazy is next week they got Oregon, so that'll be interesting to see. This will be their first week as a big favorite, but we all hit that one last week. Steve, you're the only one that picked Miami. You trusted Mario, and that Texas A&M team just looked rough. Bad tackling team. I need to watch a ton of the game. I was traveling to cover our USF Bulls, but Miami looked pretty good there.
Yeah, in all fairness, I felt like it was more my my choice was more of an indictment against Jimbo Fisher than it was to Mario Cristobal. I just want to.
It was a real toss-up of which coach you wanted to fade more.
Do you like? Yeah, there's an acronym that you can throw in there, or not an acronym, a comparison you can throw in there between a sandwich, something else. But I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
family friendly show. I'm trying to be different, trying to be more serious. But yeah, I mean, Jimbo's collecting paychecks. Jimbo's siphoning oil money from Texas A&M boosters at this point. Like, I mean, man, like they, for all the talent, for all the money, for all the NIL, for everything that Texas A&M has for advantage, they somehow have the coach who just absolutely cannot give a care right now, and it's very apparent. And you know, he'll put together a reasonable game here and there, but he's, you know, a guy playing checkers and everyone else is playing chess around them. I mean, Texas A&M has to do something about the Jimbo Fisher problem. They took a gamble. You know, this guy wants to get paid more and had success at Florida State, yada, yada, yada. It's not replicating, man. You gotta learn a couple of this here at this point.
Can anything from that game, Nick? Did you get a chance to watch it?
I watched a little bit of it. I think now to be fair, I think the Texas A&M offense wasn't bad. I think Connor Wigman definitely looked pretty good at certain points of the game. Like I mentioned last week, like this wasn't the slog that last year's A&M Miami game was. Like I think both offenses actually produced pretty well throughout the game. It's just for my pick. I mean, I thought that Texas A&M. I had it flipped. I thought Texas A&M would be the one that win like 48-31 or whatever the final score was. But going back to what you were saying about Jimbo, Steve, the pressure is really going to be on A&M these next couple of weeks or these next couple of months because we're going to touch on it in just a second. The SEC West is wide open this year. So if there was a year for Texas A&M to finally like sneak in and actually make it to Atlanta, it's this year. And buddy, if you're not able to step up and get it done in this SEC West this year, it just ain't happening.
Yeah, my big question is, can Texas A&M afford Jimbo and Deion's buyouts? Right, I think that could be get Deion back to Texas. Speaking of Texas, the next game we picked, Nick, you and I were on the Longhorns over Bama. Steve, you picked Bama. That was your lone loss. Texas looked pretty good, man. I got to watch a little bit of it in the press box. It seemed like every time Bama would kind of counter punch, and you thought, all right, here they're coming back now. Texas would have something right back for them. So they played really well, and now they're kind of, I mean, the schedule's not, if you can kind of play like you did against Bama, the schedule's not too difficult the rest of the way. So definitely, I think, a playoff chance for Texas, right?
For sure. Like you mentioned, like they were poised, confident. Like, what was it in the third quarter? Bama like briefly took the lead, and again, you're saying like, oh, we've seen this countless number of times, and it's like, nah, man. Quinn Ewers to Xavier Worthy, Quinn Ewers to like just straight over the top. Like that was an impressive performance. That was like I mentioned last week. That was the exact like turning point, cornerstone moment Sark needed for this Texas program, especially with them basically joining the ranks of Alabama and Georgia next year in the SEC. Like that was the type of win that could propel like this program into that consistent top tier, like playoff caliber type of team.
Yeah, and they certainly seem to be kind of on that way. Oklahoma seems to be the next big one for them, and you know, I wonder if you had that line right now, what it would be. I think Texas A&M might be Texas might be a double-digit favorite, maybe. Steve, did you get a chance to watch it, or what are you kind of? And we'll kind of actually, you know what? I'll get your thoughts on Bama when we talk USF Bama. Let's get through off the board picks. My Oregon -6.5 was never in doubt against Texas Tech. It's not like it took a pick six on the last drive of the game to cover that. It did. Oklahoma State, Nate had Oklahoma State -3.5. They covered pretty easily. Vito wanted me to mention that his UConn +3 pick was terrible, but I liked it in the moment, so I'm not going to say anything bad about it. Nick, Texas State plus 12.5 against UTSA. Is there something going? And we're going to talk more UTSA later, but is there something going on there?
It's not right with Frank Harris and this team.
Like he got hurt a little bit, but yeah.
I mean, like shout out to Texas State. Like GJ Kinney's getting that program turned around like pretty quickly in year one. You know, they weren't able to ultimately pull out the win last Saturday, but still, you go into the Alamo Dome, which is a low-key pretty tough environment. Like they always pull in pretty good crowds over at UTSA. You know, you go into this environment against this basically a rival right down I-35, and you at least put a scare into him and pull within a score. So another impressive showing even in a loss for Texas State.
And Steve had Cal plus 6.5 in a super ugly game. And covered, so no problems. All right, so let's get to our games this week. So Steve's on fire. He's missed one game, and it was against a bet on Alabama, which you can't really blame him for. Speaking of Alabama, they go on the road to play at USF. A lot of people. I did a Florida podcast earlier this week, and I said, "Yeah, Alabama's playing at USF," and the guy's eyes about bugged out of his head. He had to like double check me because you could tell because he asked me when the game was. I just told him who they're playing. You could tell he went and looked. Oh, it's at 3:30. Like he had to make sure I was not mistaken. But yes, Alabama is traveling to play in Raymond James. They are currently a 32-point favorite coming off the loss. The over/under is 61.5, I believe.
Yes.
Steve, did you watch a little Alabama Texas and kind of what are your thoughts on this game and maybe Alabama's mental state coming out of that game?
Right. I'll start with the good for USF, at least as a homer as I am. What great pregame publicity this is going to bring to the program. I mean, they're going to talk about this extensively. This can be an easy leeway into the on-campus stadium that USF is doing and talking about the Alex Golesh storylines. I mean, Yahoo put out an article about it today. There was a lot more people at the media scrum today. This is really good publicity before the game for USF. The bad side is the game has to happen, and it's not going to be fun. I mean, I'm sure some guys will have fun with it, and USF will compete, and Golesh is going to do everything he possibly can to put his guys in the best position to compete in this game. But, I mean, size-wise, talent-wise, there's already a disparity whenever you have a team in the SEC, teams with high blue-chip ratios. There's already going to be a big disparity, and you're just so happening to get a team who's coming off a loss and they need a bounce-back game. The stars aren't aligning for a monumental upset. I mean, you can watch Bama week in and week out, and they're still just going to be clinical. They're going to be surgical. You know, Golesh said during his press conference, the biggest game is the next game. The most important game is the next game. You know, Bama's not going to look ahead to Ole Miss. They're not looking ahead to Tennessee. They're not looking ahead to anyone else. Just like USF isn't looking ahead to Rice. They're not looking ahead to Navy or whomever else. You know, this is the most important game for these two coaches, and I think it's going to show. And I think USF is going to be able to compete at times. I think we're going to see some progress week in and week out, but 32 points is a lot, and I think they can probably cover that pretty easily without having to dig too deep into the playbook. So I think Bama by 32 at least. They're not going to want to run up the score or anything like that. That's not the Saban way, but I think they'll put this away comfortably.
All right, Nick, where are you on this game? Steve's got Bama by 32. Where do you think they can cover that large number?
So I'm going to start off by kind of paraphrasing something Bud Elliott says from time to time. Take the paycheck, take the ass whooping. So listen, I wrote all of this down. I think this Alabama team is mid by their own standards, especially on offense. I don't think this team has a single first-round player on offense. And Jalen, I mean, you saw last week, we've kind of known this. Jalen Milroe is a huge drop-off at quarterback from what they've had in the past. this is an Alabama team that could mess around and honestly finish the season 8-4 if they like really mess around. Like I just mentioned, the SEC West is wide open and they could actually lose a few games. But I mean, for Saturday, man, like the talent gap is just too wide. Like it's too much. You may get a situation where like, you know how like every Saturday, you know, you have like this heavy team that's a heavy favorite playing like this heavy underdog team, right? And then like only then that underdog team like starts out good, and then people screenshot like, hey, look, like like Tennessee with Austin Peay last week, where it's like, oh, hey, look, Austin Peay's up 10-7, whatever, and everyone screenshots like this, and like at the end of the first quarter. You could have a scenario like that here where like USF gets hot early in the first quarter, but they're just going to step again, the talent differential is just too much. Just give Bama should be able to easily cover here. I think the over will hit because I do think that USF could put a couple of good drives together and could put a couple of scores on the board late, but come on.
Yeah, my biggest concern going back and watching FAMU versus USF just for our Bear Examiner film room stuff, they could not really handle FAMU's front. Like the interior line had trouble with FAMU's front. This is a whole different animal with Alabama's front. So I think they're going to have a really hard time scoring and until maybe later in the game when they ease off. But on the other end of it, if you're Alabama, you're not going to get your backup quarterback a bunch of valuable reps on the football. Like they thought about replacing Milroe in that game. So they're not going to see what they got from the other guys. I think they will. With that, I think Bama will cover the 32. I thought it was going to be in the 40s. Yeah, my hot take all off season that was USF was going to cover the spread no matter what it was. That was based on USF being a lot better on offense. They're struggling right now a little bit and really dependent on explosive plays. And you know, Alabama maybe not wanting to show much because Tennessee's going to use this game, I'm sure, to game plan later in the year. I don't think they have to show much. They can just line up and base and just wreck USF's front. So, yeah, I'll take Alabama as well. So that's everybody taking Alabama. So if you're a non-USF person wondering a different perspective, all the USF people just took Alabama by 32. So it seems like it should have been higher. Next up, we've got Tennessee at Florida. This one's moved all over the place. I think it opened at 4, moved up to 7.5. Now it's at 6.5. Nate and Vito are both on Tennessee minus 6.5. I'm actually going to go. I'm going to do a Blog Boy Roundtable first here. I'm going to take a total. I'm going to go under the 58.5. The way I think this game maybe comes out is the possibilities are Tennessee wins by, let's say, 14-20 because Florida's offense is really bad, or Florida's defense is able to. I think Florida's defense is much improved this year. They're able to hold Tennessee down a little bit, and the game's a little bit tighter. I still don't know. The spread kind of freaks me out a little bit. Florida's home field advantage should come into play, but I don't like either side enough, so I'm going to go under 50.5. I just think that happens more often than not. Nick, where are you going in this game?
I also had under 50, the under in this one, but my pick, I don't feel great about it, but I'm gonna go Tennessee minus 6.5. Like I mentioned before, like Tennessee, they were kind of sleepy in the first half, like kind of sleepy and sloppy against Austin Peay, but then eventually got together. And I think particularly for this game, it's a rivalry game. It's their SEC opener. They should be able to get up for this one. Just for me, it just comes down to like you mentioned, Florida's defense is improved, but to me, it's like, okay, which offense can still get things going? And again, I still trust I trust Tennessee way more than I do a Graham Mertz led Florida offense.
If I had to pick a side, I probably would have leaned Tennessee just because I'm not quite sure. Florida was so out of sync against Utah. I'm not quite sure what they'll be. And Tennessee's defense has showed really well against two really bad teams. So I don't like, they're kind of an enigma to me. I think Florida might be able to like go big and run on them, but I don't know because of how they looked against Utah. They looked really bad up front. So they might not score a bunch. So that's why I like that under. Steve, where do you lean? So far we've got an under by me, and everybody else has got Tennessee by 6.5.
Yeah. So there are two things that I want to comment about this game. I wasn't sure about this at first. I really like Austin Armstrong. I think he's a great defensive mind. I think he's got the enthusiasm. He's got the psycho defensive coordinator vibes about. Like, he can be a serial killer on the side. So that's always a big plus in my book for a defensive coordinator. And then there's another portion of this, and I'm calling it the USF taketh away curse, where whenever USF takes a pivotal piece of a team, of a setup or something like that, that team usually, or organization or whatever, usually falls apart pretty quickly thereafter. Prime example, I took Gary Bohannon from Baylor. Baylor looks like shambles right now. You take Todd Orlando away from Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic doing great on defense right now, and they lost one of their key guys. And I think the Alex Golish hiring away from Tennessee is having a little bit of effect on Josh Heupel and how he was building that team. So I'm also going on this one because I'm just, if I go against you guys on something, it's got to be right. So I'm going to go with Florida covering that 6.5.
Oh.
I don't think they're going to upset them, but I think it's going to be close. It's a huge rivalry game in the swamp. That, trust me, whatever we think, the speed of Missy's offense and everything like that, I think Austin Armstrong has got the sicko playbook for deep balls to try to throw Joe Milton off at this point. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he's bringing 8 on like a safety blitz just to get him uncomfortable at times, knowing well that they could score 70 yards on a touchdown or something.
Yeah, his defense at Southern Miss led the country in blitz rate last year. He'll have his hands full with Tennessee, but these games are usually pretty close, even when Tennessee's a favorite. And this is, I think, the third time they've ever been, or third time like the last 30 years they've been a favorite at Florida. They lost the other two, so not that particularly matters. But
Tennessee hasn't won in Gainesville since 2003, so that's also something to keep in mind.
And Casey Clausen, I think, struck up the band after that game. That was a tough one. All right, we've got another rivalry game next. This week was not great in terms of the slate. That's why game day is at Colorado State. That everyone loves Deion, but not a great slate of games. But this one, at least in terms of like a nice rivalry, this one's got to be near the top. We've got the Backyard Brawl. We've got Pitt as a 1-point favorite on the road at West Virginia. An old Big East battle here, right? Nick, where are you leaning in this one?
Of course, you got to take the under, but my official pick, I'm still sticking with the spread. The spread for my pick, I'm going to go West Virginia here. West Virginia +1. This game's going to be scrappy and sloppy as God intended all backyard brawls to be. But I'm basing my pick on this Pitt offense is butt, man. Like what they did against Cincinnati last week. Phil Jerkovic going 10 of 32 and somehow scoring 3 touchdowns. And the thing is, like, they lost 27-21, but that game could have been a lot worse if you go back and look at the box score, because Cincinnati's offense stalled out in the basically all second half outside of a touchdown they scored in the third quarter. And then Pitt was only able to put 2 touchdowns on the board because there was one drive where they got bailed out by pass interference twice. And then there was another drive where they connected on a 60-yard pass and had an easy go into the end zone. This offense, Pat Narduzzi has nerfed this offense since Kenny Pickett left. And I think in Morgantown at home, Neil Brown, he's been the biggest hot seat candidate in college football heading into the season. He doesn't have a signature rivalry win in his entire tenure. I think he'll get up for this. His fans, his players will get up for this, and he'll get that big rivalry win that he's so desperately desired at West Virginia. So give me the Nears.
Steeg, where are you going on this one?
Buddy, is this the doo-doo game of the week? Let me tell you something. Oh my god.
It's a backyard brawl, Steeg. It's not supposed to be pretty. Last year was an abomination.
Yeah, and as Nick said, I mean, the backyard brawl is God's way of just telling you that it's sloppy football. I mean, like you can have like clinical, clean football in the Army Navy game or Army Air Force or like any of the Commander-in-Chief trophy games, and then you get like completely exact opposite of that with Pitt, West Virginia. Wouldn't be surprised if there's more penalties penalties with both teams combined. Filipowic's passing yards total. Because that guy is pretty bad at throwing the football. I'm jinxing myself so much. He's going to throw for like 450. Pitt's defensive line is pretty good. Watched a little bit of their games as I skimmed through highlights to try to get any sort of intelligent opinion about most of these games. But to Nick's point, I do think that West Virginia and Neil Brown are really, really reeling for some sort of positivity. I think the most positive thing that's been around that program besides their win last week was Neil Brown is no longer in the betting odds favorite to be the first fired coach. I think Jimbo Fisher and Danny Gonzalez like passed him or something like that. So that's a positive. And then I think they win this. I think they win this right. I think at West Virginia plays a pretty big hand in that. Phil Yurkovich, I don't think has the mental capacity to handle a road crowd that's just going to absolutely be mean to him all night. If he can't handle some boos every once in a while, buddy, you're in for a world hurt with what those fine folks from the Appalachians are going to say about you. So give me the Mountaineers here. This is not a blessing to Neil Brown in West Virginia. I think this is just another yuck bowl.
Yeah, Vito has Pitt. He likes Pitt in this one, but I'm with you guys, and so is Nate. We're riding with the Mountaineers here. West Virginia +1 at home underdog in the backyard brawl. You got to take the home underdog. And West Virginia really didn't look bad against Penn State earlier this year. They played pretty good in that game, which I'd say Penn State's probably the best opponent either of these two have played. So, all right, now let's go off the board here. I'll start with Nate and Vito's pick. We talked about UTSA. Something's going on there. Something's kind of weird. I think they lost a right tackle too, or one of their tackles. They lost. Frank Harris might be hurt or injured a little bit. So Nathan Bond is going to take Army +8.5 against UTSA there. He thinks something's going on, and he thinks Army can kind of keep it close there as the game goes on. So that's his pick, Army +8.5. Vito, I like this pick here. This is an interesting one. This is a game I didn't even kind of realize was happening until early in the week. I saw it, and I'm surprised more people aren't talking about it. But you got Western Kentucky at Ohio State. Western Kentucky is a 29-point underdog. Vito likes Western Kentucky +29. I think they might get Corley back this week. If they do, maybe you can throw it around enough and you don't keep the ball in your hand enough for your offensive line to be too big of an issue. So maybe that can happen. And as Vito points out, Ohio State only beat Youngstown State by 28. So
that's a fierce rivalry.
That's
Ohio State still has like some quarterback issue, or not issues, just like just general
issues.
Yeah, about Kyle McCord that we'll find out when they play Notre Dame next week.
Yeah, I think they came out and said McCord was the guy, but yeah, that's always tenuous until you actually win something like a real game, right? I'll go ahead and get mine out of the way. I like LSU -9.5 against Mississippi State. I think they're on the road. LSU, there's been some weird stuff with them, but if you go back to look at that FSU game, it really got away from them in the second half. They were a couple mistakes from being up a few scores in that game. And even once it started going back and forth, they had a couple of drops on what plays that could have been touchdowns when they were trying to match FSU. That Florida State offense is probably one of the toughest to defend in the country. Mississippi State is not that. So I think LSU can get up on Mississippi State, a team that had to go to overtime against Arizona, even though they were +4 in the turnover margin. So, yeah, give me LSU minus 9.5 there. Steeg, off the board, where'd you go?
I didn't, game day's going there, Big Noon's going there, 60 Minutes is going there, I'm going there. Colorado 23.5 against Colorado State. Boy, when the spotlight is on Deion right now, he wants it to be known. And I think with all of the pressure and all the talking lines, I mean, this guy's gonna milk the spotlight for every inch that he has. And I think they're going to go out there and absolutely just mollybop Colorado State. Colorado State is not a very good team. They got diced up by Cam Ward in the passing. I think Cam Ward passed for like 460 yards against Colorado State at the beginning of the year. Colorado State does have the benefit of a really weird placed bye week in week 2 to kind of have 2 weeks to prepare for this. There's preparation that they'll have against Deion Sanders. I think that Colorado is much more talented. I think 23.5 is a very generous number that they can give because I think, frankly, Colorado's offense won't be stopped very much against Colorado State's defense. I don't see this game being close. I think Deion is going to take every opportunity to bury a team that he possibly can. Give me Colorado with like a 60 points. Like Nick Saban will be nice. Yeah, Nick Saban will be nice to USF in the second half. I don't think Deion is going to be very nice in the second half. I think the over-under is 61 for Colorado. I think they will score 61.
Well, there you go. Nick, what do you like?
I'm going to the Lone Star State for a now Big 12 matchup. Give me TCU minus 7.5 against Houston for two reasons. So TCU obviously lost that ridiculous game against Colorado 2 weeks ago, and they've kind of been they got humbled. They got humbled in that game. Sonny Dykes basically said that afterwards. I think that they are going to be motivated to kind of redeem themselves. It's like, hey, don't write us off just yet. Yeah, we lost that opener, but this is still a pretty good team. I know, like, it's not the team from last year that went to the national championship game, but this is still a really good quality team, and we're going to go out and try to prove this against a new in-state conference rival in Houston that, for my second reason, is bad, man. Like, we were talking I mentioned this like last Saturday in the Discord, and it just astounds me how Houston, spent decades trying to get into the Big 12, putting all of their energy and efforts and getting into the Big 12. And they finally get across the finish line and get everything that they want. And that's the moment that they start to fall apart. And it doesn't look like Dana's going to be around for much longer beyond this season, because they went to overtime against Rice last week, but that should have been, they were down 28-0. And yeah, Rice is a decent opponent. They won 5 games, went to a bowl last year. But man, they're going to be in for some rough times when they really get into the meat of conference play in the Big 12. And it's going to start this Saturday with TCU coming to town. So give me the Horned Frogs to cover. And
yeah, I don't know if you heard, I gasped when you gave that because I couldn't believe it was that. You said 7.5. I was like, okay, who are they playing? Houston. I think the final score of the Colorado game has been really unflattering to TCU. If you go back and watch the game, they threw 2 picks in the end zone. Like, they were very close to winning that game by 10 plus. Like, this is not a terrible team. And yeah, Houston down bad, I think would be a good way to describe them.
Down bad.
So yeah, all right. So we all like Bama. Steve likes Florida. Everybody else likes Tennessee. I like the under 58.5 in that game. We all like WVU against Pitt except for Vito. And then I've got LSU minus 9.5. Nate has Army plus 8.5. Vito Western Kentucky plus 29. Nick TCU minus 7.5. And Steve Colorado and Coach Prime minus 23.5 at Colorado State. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, leave a comment, help us game the YouTube algorithm. We'll be back next week reviewing these picks and making some more. What's going to be a pretty good week next week. You got some Clemson, Florida State. You got some other pretty good ones. Bama, Ole Miss. Bama coming off 2 straight losses against Ole Miss, right? So we'll be back next week. Looking back at these, looking forward to the next week of games. Thank you for watching.